the gathering storm. The Krovanax war fleet assembled in the void like a swarm of metallic locusts, their obsidian hulls drinking in the distant starlight. Commander Xyloth stood on the bridge of the flagship Devastation's embrace, his 4 crystalline eyes reflecting the holographic display of the Terran colony world of Meridian's Hope. 3 million human settlers, his tactical officer, Verashin, chittered with anticipation. Minimal defensive capabilities. Their reinforcements are 6 standard cycles away. Xyloth's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The Krovanax had conquered 47 star systems in their expansion across the Orion Arm. The humans were newcomers to galactic civilization, barely 3 generations since their first faster-than-light vessel. They had established 12 colony worlds, each one ripe for the taking. The galactic concordance will protest, Verashin added, though her tone suggested she cared little. Let them, Xyloth replied. By the time they convene their committees and draft their resolutions, Meridian's Hope will be ours. The humans will learn what every other species has learned: the strong devour the weak. It is the way of the cosmos. On Meridian's Hope, Governor Sienna Vex stood in the Emergency Operations Center, watching the tactical display with grim determination. She was 38 years old, a former colonial marine who had traded her rifle for a desk when she thought the galaxy might finally know peace. Fleet Command acknowledges our distress signal, reported Lieutenant Darius Chin, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The 7th Fleet is mobilizing, but they're 6 days out. And the Krovanax will be here in 6 hours, Sienna said quietly. She looked at the faces around her, colonists who had come here to build farms, raise families, and live beneath alien skies. Initiate Evacuation Protocol Omega-7. Every civilian ship, every transport, everything that can break orbit. Ma'am, Chin hesitated. That's only capacity for 200,000. We have 3 million people. Sienna's jaw tightened. I know the math, Lieutenant. But we save who we can. She touched her communication implant. This is Governor Vex to all military personnel. We hold the line until every civilian ship is away. No exceptions. No surrender. The defense garrison of Meridian's Hope numbered just 8,000 colonial marines, equipped with weapons designed for peacekeeping, not total war. They had 12 orbital defense platforms, half of which were still under construction. Captain Marcus Thorne assembled his company in the shadow of the colony's main shield generator. These were his people. Men and women he had trained with, fought beside in minor skirmishes against pirates and raiders. They weren't ready for this. But they would have to be. Listen up, Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the assembled troops. In 6 hours, the biggest invasion force this sector has ever seen is going to hit us. Command says the 7th Fleet is coming, but they're 6 days away. He paused, letting that sink in. Our job is simple. We buy time for the civilians to evacuate. Every hour we hold is another 50,000 lives saved. A young private, barely 20 years old, raised his hand. Sir, what about us? Marcus met the young man's eyes. He could have lied. He could have given them false hope. But these were Marines and they deserved the truth. We hold until relief arrives or until we can't hold anymore. The Krovanax don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They annihilate. He drew his sidearm and checked the charge. So we make them pay for every meter of dirt. We make them remember that humans don't go quietly into the dark. The Marines began to move to their positions, but Marcus caught the shoulder of his second-in-command, Lieutenant Kara Novak. She was 32, a veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts, with scars that told stories she rarely shared. You know we're not walking away from this, she said softly. Marcus nodded. I know. But maybe the people on those transports will remember that someone stood in the gap for them. Maybe that matters. Maybe, Kara agreed, then smiled grimly. Besides, I always wanted to see what a real war looked like. As the Krovanax fleet began its final approach, Admiral Lysander Kane aboard the flagship Indomitable received the distress signal from Meridian's Hope. He was 60 years old, gray-haired, and carrying the weight of every decision he had ever made in 40 years of service. How long? He asked his navigator. 6 days, 17 hours at maximum burn, sir. We can't go faster without tearing the fleet apart. Lysander stared at the star map, at the tiny point of light that represented Meridian's Hope and the 3 million souls who lived there. He had grandchildren on that world. His daughter had moved there 5 years ago to escape the crowds of Earth. Send a message to the Krovanax flagship on all frequencies, he ordered. Tell them that any aggression against Meridian's Hope will be considered an act of war against the Terran Federation. Tell them we're coming. His communications officer looked up. Sir, they're already entering orbital bombardment range. Lysander closed his eyes. Then tell them we'll see them in 6 days. And that we have very long memories. As the first Krovanax warships entered orbit around Meridian's Hope, Xyloth watched the evacuation transports struggling to leave the planet's gravity well. Easy targets. But he had learned long ago that slaughtering fleeing refugees only strengthened resolve. Better to let some escape to spread fear throughout human space. Target military installations only, he commanded. Let the transports go. When the humans hear how easily we took this world, the next ones will surrender without a fight. It was the first of many miscalculations Xyloth would make about humanity. The battle for Meridian's Hope had begun. The last stand. The first Krovanax orbital strike hit Defense Platform 7 at 0600 hours local time. The platform vaporized in a flash of blue-white fire, taking its crew of 35 with it. Captain Marcus Thorne watched from the surface command post as 11 more platforms died in the next 20 minutes. All platforms destroyed, Lieutenant Chin reported from the operations center. Enemy landing craft deploying. Multiple vectors. They're coming down everywhere. Governor Sienna Vex stood beside him, watching the tactical display transform into a nightmare of descending red icons. How many transports away? 73 cleared orbit. Another 147 still loading or waiting for launch clearance. 73 ships. Maybe 200,000 people. That meant 2.8 million still on the ground. Keep them moving, Sienna ordered. Marcus, how long can you hold the starport? Marcus's voice came through crackling with interference from the orbital bombardment. As long as you need, ma'am. We've got good positions here. The Krovanax will have to dig us out meter by meter. On the perimeter of Starport Delta, Marcus's Marines had transformed the civilian landing facility into a fortress. They had 8 hours to prepare and they had used every minute. Cargo containers formed makeshift walls. Civilian construction vehicles had been repurposed to dig trenches. Every weapon in the colony's armory had been distributed. The first Krovanax landers touched down 3 kilometers from the starport. The alien warriors that emerged stood nearly 3 meters tall, their exoskeletons gleaming like black mirrors. They carried plasma weapons that could melt through concrete, and they moved with the confidence of a species that had conquered worlds. Marcus watched them through his rifle's scope. Hold fire. Let them get closer. Wait for my signal. The Krovanax advanced in perfect formation, 5,000 strong, towards the 800 humans dug in around the starport. They had no cover, no caution. Why would they? They had crushed every resistance they had ever encountered. Now, Marcus whispered into his comm. 800 rifles spoke as one. The Krovanax front line shattered. Plasma fire lanced back toward the human positions, but the Marines were already moving, firing from new angles, using the terrain they knew intimately. Mortars, fire for effect. Marcus commanded. Crude explosives, anything the colony's engineers could manufacture in 8 hours, rained down on the Krovanax formation. It wouldn't stop them, but it would slow them down. In orbit, Commander Xyloth stared at the tactical feed in disbelief. They dare to resist? Send in the second wave. And the third. I want that starport leveled within the hour. But the hour came and went, and the starport still stood. The Krovanax paid for every meter in blood, or whatever served as blood in their crystalline bodies. They had never encountered defenders so stubborn, so willing to die in place rather than retreat. Lieutenant Kara Novak led a counterattack against a Krovanax flanking force, her squad of 40 Marines hitting the aliens from an unexpected angle. Remember your training. Aim for the joints in their armor. Short controlled bursts. The close-quarters battle was brutal. Krovanax warriors, twice the height of humans, discovered that size meant nothing when fighting in tight confines. Kara's combat knife found the weak points in alien armor, and her squad showed the Krovanax what humans called close-quarters battle. 23 Marines died in that engagement. But 300 Krovanax never left the warehouse district. Governor Vex watched the battle unfold from the operations center, her heart breaking with every friendly icon that winked out on the tactical display. How many transports now? 149 away, Chin reported. 400,000 civilians evacuated. And the Krovanax? They've committed 20,000 ground troops. They're taking casualties at a rate of 10 to 1, but he didn't need to finish. 10 to 1 was good. 10 to 1 was incredible. But it wasn't enough. Marcus's voice came through the comm, strained but steady. Governor, we're pulling back to the inner perimeter. We've bloodied them but they keep coming. You need to speed up that evacuation. We're moving as fast as we can, Captain. Every minute you buy saves lives. Then we'll buy you as many minutes as we can, ma'am. The battle raged for 18 hours. The Krovenaks, used to quick victories, found themselves in a grinding street-to-street slugfest with an enemy that refused to break. They had plasma weapons and powered armor. But the humans had something the Krovenaks had never encountered: the absolute conviction that some things were worth dying for. Private Jensen, the young Marine who had asked Marcus about their chances, held a collapsed building entrance with just 3 others for 4 hours. When a Krovenak's plasma grenade finally brought down the structure, killing him and his squad, they had accounted for 63 enemy warriors. By the 20-hour mark, only 200 Marines remained combat effective. They had retreated to the starport's main terminal, turning it into a final fortress. Behind them, the last transports were loading the final civilians. Kara Novak, blood streaming from a gash across her forehead, found Marcus in the command post. "That's it. Last transport is loading now. 30 minutes and everyone who's getting out is out." Marcus nodded. "Then we hold for 30 minutes. We've got maybe 60 effectives left. They've got thousands." "Then we hold for 30 minutes, Marcus repeated. He touched his comm. "All units, this is Thorn. Last transport departs in 30 minutes. After that, we execute evacuation protocol Delta." Kara's eyes widened. "Marcus, there are no shuttles left for us." "I know. The protocol is for us too." "I know what the protocol is, Kara." Marcus checked his rifle. "But those transports need time to clear orbital space. The Krovenaks will have ships waiting to intercept. We need to keep their attention down here." Understanding dawned on Kara's face. "You magnificent bastard. You're going to make them think we're still fighting for the starport when we're really just buying time for the evacuation fleet." "Exactly. And if they're focused on us, they're not focused on defenseless transport ships." The final 30 minutes were the longest of Marcus Thorne's life. Wave after wave of Krovenaks crashed against the terminal building. The Marines fought from behind overturned furniture, inside ventilation shafts, from the upper floors, from the basement. They used every trick, every bit of training, every ounce of desperate courage. When the last transport's engines roared to life, only 12 Marines were still alive. Marcus stood at the main entrance, firing his rifle on full automatic as Krovenak's warriors swarmed toward him. "Transport is away," Kara shouted. "It's clear. Marcus, we did it." Marcus smiled, ejected his spent magazine and loaded his last one. Yeah, we did." The final message from Starport Delta was audio only, broadcast on all frequencies. It was Captain Marcus Thorne's voice. "This is Meridian's hope to any Terran forces. Mission accomplished. Evacuation complete. 657,000 civilians saved. Tell them we held the line." Then silence. When Commander Xyloth finally entered the starport terminal, he found 12 human bodies surrounded by hundreds of Krovenaks dead. The humans had fought to the last bullet, to the last breath. "How many?" he asked Verishin. "Ground forces?" "We lost 8,300 warriors, Commander." Xyloth stared at the carnage. 8,000 dead to take one colony. Killed by less than 1,000 humans with inferior weapons and no hope of survival. "What manner of species does this?" he whispered. He would discover the answer soon enough. The burning retreat. Admiral Lysander Kane stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as the 7th Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Meridian system. What he saw made his blood run cold. Meridian's hope burned. Even from this distance, the planet's surface showed the scars of orbital bombardment. And hanging in orbit like a constellation of death, the Krovenak's war fleet waited. "Status of the colony?" Lysander demanded. Commander Reyna Okoye, his tactical officer, worked her console frantically. "Scanning for life signs. Admiral, I'm reading evacuation transponders. Lots of them. Civilian transports, moving out system at maximum burn." "How many made it out?" 657,000, sir. "We're receiving a final transmission from the surface garrison." She paused, her voice catching. "It's from a Captain Marcus Thorne. Transmitted 22 hours ago." Lysander listened to Thorne's final message. When it ended, the bridge was silent. "The garrison?" he asked quietly. "All Kia, sir. They held the starport for 30 hours against overwhelming odds." Lysander closed his eyes, thinking of his daughter, his grandchildren. They had made it onto one of those transports. Because 8,000 colonial Marines had bought them time with their lives. "Fleet status?" he asked. 37 capital ships, 147 escorts, all combat ready. "We outgunned them, sir." Okoye's voice carried a note of savage satisfaction. We can take them. But Lysander studied the tactical display with the eye of someone who had fought in 4 wars. The Krovenak's fleet was positioned perfectly to intercept the fleeing transports. If he engaged now, the battle would spread across the system. Civilian ships would be caught in the crossfire. Reyna, if we engage now, what's the likelihood of civilian casualties? Okoye ran the simulations. 73% chance of significant transport losses. The Krovenaks will use them as shields or targets of opportunity. Lysander's hands gripped the command rail until his knuckles went white. Every instinct screamed at him to attack, to make the Krovenaks pay for what they had done. But he hadn't survived 40 years in the service by following instinct over strategy. Signal the fleet. We're withdrawing. The bridge erupted in protest. Okoye stepped close, her voice low and urgent. Sir, the crew won't understand. After what happened, the crew will follow orders, Lysander cut her off. And so will you, Commander. We retreat. We escort those transports out of range. We keep every single civilian who survived that hell alive. He raised his voice so the entire bridge could hear. The Krovenaks think they've won a victory here. Let them think it. Let them celebrate. Because when we come back, we're not coming to fight a battle. Sir? Okoye asked. We're coming to end a species. The retreat of the 7th Fleet sent shockwaves through the Terran Federation. Politicians called it cowardice. Media outlets played the footage on repeat. The most powerful human fleet in existence turning away from a fight, abandoning a conquered colony world. Fleet Admiral Helena Darkwood sat in the emergency session of the Federation Council, listening to the outrage, the demands for Lysander's court-martial. She was 72, the highest-ranking military officer in human space, and she had been in the service when humanity still fought itself instead of the stars. Enough, she said quietly, but her voice carried across the chamber. You want to talk about cowardice? 8,000 Marines held a starport for 30 hours against 8,000 Krovenaks warriors. They all died. But 657,000 civilians lived. That's not cowardice. That's the price of victory. Victory? Senator Markham stood, his face red with anger. We abandoned a colony. We retreated. The entire galaxy is watching and they see weakness. Helena's eyes were cold. Let them see what they wish. Admiral Kane saved 657,000 lives. And now, with those lives safe, we're going to show the galaxy what happens when you attack humanity. She activated the holographic display, showing the rapidly assembling fleets across human space. The Krovenaks have 47 conquered systems. 300 billion inhabitants under their rule. They think we're weak because we retreated once. They're about to learn that human patience is not human weakness. What are you proposing? Counselor Zhang asked. Total war. Not for territory. Not for resources. For a principle. We're going to make an example of the Krovenaks that will echo for 1,000 years. Helena's smile was terrifying. We're going to teach the galaxy what happens when you make humanity retreat. On the Krovenaks' homeworld of Kroven Prime, the Grand Dominarch Zaltharin celebrated the victory at Meridian's Hope. Xylotha's report had been edited, of course. 8,000 casualties had become acceptable losses. The human retreat had become cowardice in the face of superior forces. The humans are weak, Zaltharin declared to his assembled warlords. They defend their civilians like parent birds protecting hatchlings. This makes them predictable, vulnerable. We will conquer all their colonies one by one, and they will flee before us each time. But Xyloth, standing at the back of the chamber, remembered the starport terminal. Remembered 12 humans fighting to the last breath against impossible odds. Remembered the casualties his forces had taken against what should have been an easy victory. Grand Dominarch, he spoke up. I recommend caution. The humans fought with unexpected ferocity. Their casualties were total, but our losses were acceptable. Zaltharin cut him off. You worry too much, Xyloth. The humans have shown their weakness. When threatened, they run. Begin planning the assault on their next colony. We strike while their morale is broken. Xyloth bowed his head in submission. But in his 4 crystalline eyes, doubt flickered like a distant star. Across human space, the transformation had begun. Every shipyard worked around the clock. Every factory retooled. Every able-bodied volunteer flooded into recruitment centers. The politicians who had called for Lysander's head now found themselves swept aside by a popular fury they couldn't control. On the heavy cruiser Retribution, Captain Alara Voss watched the news feeds from her quarters. She was 45, a career officer who had fought pirates and raiders but never experienced real war. The footage from Meridian's Hope played on repeat. The burning colony, the civilian transports fleeing, the silent starport where 8,000 heroes had made their stand. Her communication console chimed. New orders. Captain Voss, report to Fleet Admiral Darkwood's flagship immediately. Bring a toothbrush. You won't be coming back for a while. Ilara smiled grimly and began packing. She had a feeling she knew what was coming. The meeting took place on the superdreadnought Vengeance Unbound, the largest warship humanity had ever constructed. 50 captains gathered in the briefing room, representing 50 of the most powerful ships in the fleet. Fleet Admiral Darkwood stood before them, no longer the politician who had addressed the council. Here she was the warrior who had earned her stars in blood and fire. Captains, you've been selected for Operation Reckoning. 6 months from now we're going to hit the Krovanax with everything we have. Not just military targets. We're going after their infrastructure, their economy, their ability to wage war. We're going to systematically dismantle their empire until they beg for peace. She activated the holographic display, showing Krovanax territory. But first we need to make them think they're winning. We need them overconfident, overextended. We need them to believe that human retreat means human defeat. Captain Voss raised her hand. You're saying we retreat again? 3 more times, Darkwood confirmed. 3 more colonies. 3 more defeats. Each time we'll save as many civilians as we can. Each time we'll make the Krovanax pay a price in blood. And each time they'll think they've broken our spirit. Her smile was terrifying. And then, when they're congratulating themselves on defeating humanity, we'll show them what a real human offensive looks like. The briefing lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 50 captains walked out with the knowledge of what was to come. Some of them wouldn't survive to see the final victory. But all of them understood the strategy. Humanity was not retreating. Humanity was loading the gun. The calculated losses. The Krovanax struck 3 more times over the following months. Each time, the pattern repeated. Overwhelming force, a desperate human defense, civilian evacuation, and then the arrival of the Terran fleet, too late to fight but in time to retreat with the survivors. On the colony world of Haven's Rest, Commander Xyloth led the assault personally. He had learned from Meridian's Hope. This time he deployed 30,000 warriors, overwhelming the human defenses through sheer numbers. The colonial marines fought with the same desperate courage, but they were crushed within 12 hours. 2 million civilians made it off-world. 800,000 didn't. When Admiral Lysander Kane arrived to find the smoking ruins of Haven's Rest, his jaw was set like stone. Log it, he told Commander Okoye. Every civilian who didn't make it. Every Marine who held the line. Log every single one. Sir, the Krovanax are broadcasting their victory across all frequencies. They're calling us cowards. They're saying humans only know how to run. Good, Lysander replied. Let them think that. Let them think we're broken. But what the Krovanax didn't see was happening in every human shipyard, every military academy, every training facility. The retreats had bought time to build, time to train, time to prepare for what was coming. On the Krovanax homeworld, Grand Dominarch Zaltherin addressed his people in triumph. 4 human colonies have fallen. Their fleets run before our might. Soon, all of human space will kneel before the Krovanax Empire. The crowds roared their approval. But in the private chambers of the military command, Xyloth studied the casualty reports with growing concern. 4 victories, he told Verashin. And we've lost 26,000 warriors. Against an enemy that supposedly only knows how to run. The Grand Dominarch says these are acceptable losses, Verashin replied, but her mandibles clicked uncertainly. Acceptable compared to what? Xyloth pulled up the tactical analyses. At Meridian's Hope, 8,000 humans held for 30 hours and killed 8,000 of our warriors. At Haven's Rest, 6,000 humans held for 12 hours and killed 7,000. They're killing us nearly 1-to-1, Verashin. They're supposed to be a young species, barely civilized. They fight well when defending, Verashin admitted. But they always retreat in the end. They lack the will for true conquest. Xyloth wasn't so sure. Something about the human retreats bothered him. They were too organized, too calculated. The humans always evacuated their civilians first, then held just long enough for them to escape. Then their fleets would arrive, always too late to fight, but in time to cover the evacuation. It was as if they were following a plan. I want intelligence reports, he ordered. Everything we know about human military production, fleet movements, troop deployments. Something doesn't add up. The intelligence reports that arrived 3 days later confirmed Xylotha's worst fears. Human military production had increased by 300%. Every shipyard was producing warships. Every factory had retooled for military hardware. Recruitment numbers had skyrocketed. They're not acting like a defeated species, Xyloth told the War Council. They're acting like a species preparing for total war. Preparing? Zaltharan laughed. Let them prepare. Let them build their ships and train their soldiers. When they finally muster the courage to face us, we will crush them as we have crushed all the others. But Xyloth had seen what desperate humans could do. He had walked through the starport on Meridian's Hope, seen the impossible defense those Marines had mounted. He remembered the look in human eyes as they fought to the last breath, not for glory or conquest, but for something simpler and more powerful, so others could live. Grand Dominarch, I recommend we pause our offensive. Consolidate our gains. Build defensive positions. Coward. Zaltharan's roar silenced the chamber. We have them on the run. Now is the time to press our advantage, not cower behind walls. He turned to his other commanders. Prepare the assault on the human colony of New Terra. It's their most developed world after Earth itself. We'll take it and we'll show the galaxy that humanity is finished. Xyloth bowed in submission, but his mind raced. New Terra had a population of 12 million and a garrison of 20,000 colonial marines. If the humans defended it the way they had defended the others, the mathematics were troubling. On Earth, in the underground command facility known as the War Room, Fleet Admiral Darkwood studied the same intelligence reports as Xyloth. The Krovenaks were planning to hit New Terra. Perfect. They're taking the bait, she told her assembled commanders. New Terra is the last retreat we'll need. After this, we go on the offensive. Admiral Lysander Kane, fresh from the retreat from Haven's Rest, stood at the holographic display. New Terra is better defended than the others. We can hold longer, evacuate more people. But the casualties will be high, Darkwood finished for him. I know. But this is the final piece. After New Terra, the Krovenaks will be overconfident and overextended. They'll have committed huge numbers of troops to occupation duty. Their supply lines will be stretched thin. And we'll have everything in place for Operation Reckoning. She pulled up a star map showing the full scope of the planned offensive. 50 fleets, 3,000 ships, 500,000 Marines in assault formations. The largest military operation in human history. The Krovenaks think we're weak because we retreat, Darkwood said. They're about to learn that a human retreat is not a defeat. It's a reload. Captain Alara Voss had spent the last 3 months transforming her ship, the Retribution, into a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had seen. New experimental weapons, upgraded shields, and a crew trained to a razor's edge. She was part of Strike Group Omega, the tip of the spear for Operation Reckoning. Captain, her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Jean Park, approached her on the bridge. The crew is ready. Weapons are charged. We could deploy now. Not yet, Alara replied. One more retreat. One more colony that needs our protection. And then, she smiled grimly. Then we show them what we've been building. On New Terra, General Nathan Cross oversaw the defensive preparations with the cold efficiency of someone who knew exactly what was coming. He had 20,000 Marines, the survivors from the previous retreats among them. They had learned from each battle, adapted, improved. The Krovenaks will hit us with everything they have, he told his command staff. This is their big push. They want to break our spirit once and for all. So we're going to do what humans do best. We're going to make them pay for every inch of ground. We're going to hold long enough to evacuate every civilian who wants to leave. And then we're going to make sure the Krovenaks remember New Terra for the rest of their very short existence. Lieutenant Kira Sato, one of the survivors from Meridian's Hope, raised her hand. General, permission to speak freely? Granted. Sir, we've retreated 4 times now. The galaxy thinks we're cowards. When do we stop retreating and start fighting back? General Cross smiled, and it was not a kind expression. Soon, Lieutenant. Very soon. But first, we need the Krovenaks to commit everything they have to this offensive. We need them overconfident, overextended, and absolutely certain they've broken us. He activated the holographic display showing the fleet positions across human space. Because in 6 weeks, every fleet that's been retreating is going to turn around and hit them with everything we have. New Terra is the last retreat. After this, there's only advance. The Marines in the room began to understand. The retreats hadn't been defeats. They had been preparation. Every evacuation had saved civilian lives. Every last stand had taught them how to fight the Krovanax. Every retreat had bought time to build the war machine that would end the Krovanax Empire. So we hold? Kira asked. We hold, Cross confirmed. And we make sure that when the historians look back at this war, they remember that New Terra was where humanity stopped retreating and started hunting. The Krovanax fleet arrived at New Terra 3 weeks later. 50,000 warriors. 300 ships. The largest invasion force they had ever assembled. Grand Dominarch Zaltharin commanded from his flagship personally. This would be the blow that broke humanity forever. This would be his greatest triumph. He had no idea he was walking into humanity's trap. The finest hour. The defense of New Terra began at dawn on the colony's 307th day. General Nathan Cross stood in the command center, watching 50,000 Krovanax warriors descend from orbit like a plague of locusts. All units, this is Cross. Remember your training. Remember Meridian's hope. Remember Haven's rest. Every hour we hold saves 50,000 lives. Make them count. The Krovanax expected another desperate defense, another eventual collapse. What they found instead was 20,000 colonial marines who had been training for this exact moment for 6 months. These weren't garrison troops anymore. They were veterans, survivors, and they had learned exactly how to kill Krovanax efficiently. The first wave of alien warriors landed in Landing Zone Alpha, expecting to sweep aside token resistance. Instead they walked into a killing field. Automated turrets tracked their movements with perfect precision. Minefields turned their formations into chaos. And when they finally reached the marine positions, they found defenders who knew every weakness in Krovanax armor, every flaw in their tactics. Commander Xyloth watched from orbit as his first wave was decimated. What's happening? Where's our tactical data? The humans are fighting differently, Commander, Verishin reported. They're using coordinated fire teams, targeting specific armor joints. They're not just defending positions, they're conducting tactical maneuvers. They're supposed to be retreating. Xyloth slammed his hand on the console. Send in the second wave. And the third. Overwhelm them. But General Cross had planned for this. Every Marine company had pre-planned fallback positions, interlocking fields of fire, and support weapons positioned to create crossfires that turned Krovanax advances into suicide runs. Lieutenant Kira Sato led her company in a textbook defense of the northern sector. Her troops moved like a single organism, each covering the others, falling back only when they had inflicted maximum damage and then setting up to do it again from a new position. Contact right 200 meters, her sergeant called out. Third squad, swing flanking fire. First squad, prepare to reposition. Second squad, hold center. Kira's orders were crisp, professional. She had learned this trade in the hell of Meridian's hope. Now she was perfecting it. The Krovanax warriors charged, confident in their superior size and firepower. They died by the dozens, cut down by Marines who had spent 6 months learning exactly how to kill them. The battle raged for 3 days. The Krovanax kept throwing warriors into the meat grinder, and the humans kept extracting a terrible price. Behind the defensive lines, the evacuation proceeded with clock-like efficiency. Transport after transport lifted off, carrying civilians to safety. On the third day, Grand Dominarch Zaltharin made his second critical mistake. Frustrated by the stubborn resistance, he ordered orbital bombardment of the civilian population centers. If they won't surrender, we'll give them nothing to defend, he declared. But General Cross had anticipated this too. The civilians were already gone from those cities, evacuated days ago. The population centers, the Krovanax bombarded, were empty buildings rigged with sensors that recorded every war crime. Got you, Cross whispered, watching the bombardment. The entire galaxy is going to see this. Admiral Lysander Kane arrived at New Terra on the 4th day with the 7th Fleet. By now, 10 million of New Terra's 12 million civilians had been evacuated. The remaining 2 million were loading onto the last transports. General Cross, this is Admiral Kane. We're here for extraction. Start pulling your people back. Negative, Admiral, Cross replied. We hold until the last transport is clear. No exceptions. General, you've held for 4 days. The Krovanax have committed their entire invasion force. You've accomplished the mission. Now get your people out. With respect, Admiral, our mission is to ensure civilian evacuation. We have 2 million civilians still on transports. We hold. Lysander understood. These weren't the garrison troops who had died on Meridian's hope. These were professionals who knew exactly what they were doing and why they were doing it. Understood, General. The fleet will provide cover fire for the transports. You have 12 hours to get everyone out. Those 12 hours were the longest of Nathan Cross's life. The Krovanax, sensing victory was slipping away, threw everything they had at the Marine positions. The fighting became savage, close-quarters battles in the ruins of the cities the Krovanax had bombarded. Lieutenant Kira Sato found herself in hand-to-hand combat with a Krovanax warrior in the shattered remains of a shopping plaza. The alien was 3 times her size, but she had been trained by survivors who had learned these techniques in blood. "You will die, human," the Krovanax warrior chittered. "Maybe," Kira replied, dodging a plasma blast. "But you first." She rolled under the alien's guard, drove her combat knife into the joint where leg met body and twisted. The Krovanax went down and Kira was already moving to the next target. All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Humans fighting with the desperation of those protecting something precious, with the skill of professionals who had trained for this moment, and with the cold fury of those who had watched too many comrades die. When the last transport cleared orbit, General Cross gave the order to withdraw. The Marines conducted a fighting retreat, moving from position to position, each one covered by the next. It was a masterpiece of tactical withdrawal that would be studied in military academies for generations. The Krovanax pursued, but they were exhausted, disorganized, and shocked by the resistance they had encountered. When they finally occupied the empty cities of New Terra, they found themselves masters of ruins and graves. Commander Xyloth walked through the shattered defensive positions, seeing the evidence of the human defense. The careful planning, the prepared positions, the coordinated fire lanes. This hadn't been a desperate last stand. This had been a professional military operation. "How many did we lose?" he asked Verishin. 23,000 warriors, Commander. More than half our invasion force." Xyloth's mandibles clicked in distress. "And the humans?" "Estimated 4,000 Marines killed. 12 million civilians evacuated successfully." The mathematics hit Xyloth like a physical blow. The Krovanax had won 5 battles now. They had conquered 5 human colonies. But they had lost over 50,000 warriors in the process. And the humans had evacuated nearly 10 million civilians while trading losses at a rate that suggested they were learning faster than the Krovanax could adapt. "This isn't victory," Xyloth said quietly. "This is a strategic defeat disguised as a tactical win. Commander? The humans have traded 5 colonies for time. Time to evacuate their civilians. Time to train their military. Time to build their fleet. And we've paid for those colonies with the blood of our finest warriors." He looked up at the stars, where he knew the human fleets were gathering. "They've been playing us from the beginning." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Lysander Kane watched the last transport dock and felt a weight lift from his shoulders. 12 million people saved. 4,000 Marines dead but 12 million civilians alive. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Fleet Command," Okoye reported. "It's Fleet Admiral Darkwood. She says it's time." Lysander had been waiting for those words for 6 months. 6 months of retreating, of watching colonies burn, of seeing good people die buying time. 6 months of playing the coward so that when the time came humanity could strike with overwhelming force. "Signal all fleets," he ordered. "Operation Reckoning is go. All ships are to proceed to their designated targets. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. No mercy for the Krovanax military. But civilians are off-limits. We're not like them." Across human space, 50 fleets began to move. 3,000 ships, representing the largest concentration of military force humanity had ever assembled. They had been building toward this moment since the first day the Krovanax attacked Meridian's Hope. The retreats were over. The counterattack had begun. The reckoning. The Krovanax Empire learned what a human offensive looked like on the 14th day of the 8th month. 50 human fleets struck 47 Krovanax systems simultaneously. It wasn't a battle. It was systematic annihilation. Captain Ilara Voss led Strike Group Omega into the Krovanax military hub of Tauran 4. Her ship, the Retribution, had been transformed into a weapon specifically designed to kill Krovanax vessels. Every lesson learned from 6 months of retreating, every weakness identified, every vulnerability exploited. Targets acquired, her weapons officer reported. Krovanax defensive fleet, 30 ships. Fire at will, Ilara commanded. The new weapons humanity had developed. Railguns that fired projectiles at near-light speed, missiles with AI targeting that couldn't be jammed, energy weapons that punched through Krovanax shields like paper, tore through the defensive fleet in minutes. The Krovanax had been designed to fight species that met them in conventional warfare. They had no answer for an enemy that had spent 6 months studying every detail of their tactics, their technology, their weaknesses. Defensive fleet destroyed, the tactical officer reported. Orbital installations requesting surrender. Accepted, Ilara said. But broadcast this on all frequencies. Any Krovanax military forces that surrender will be taken prisoner according to the rules of war. Any that resist will be destroyed. We're not here for genocide. We're here to end the Krovanax Empire's ability to wage war. That message was repeated across 47 systems. Some Krovanax forces surrendered immediately, understanding they had no chance. Others fought to the last warrior and discovered that humanity had become very good at killing Krovanax. On Krovan Prime, the Krovanax homeworld, Grand Dominarch Zaltharan watched his empire collapse in real time. Reports flooded in from every system. Human fleets emerging from faster-than-light travel, overwhelming local defenses, destroying military installations with surgical precision, and then moving on to the next target. How? He demanded. How are they everywhere at once? Commander Xyloth, recalled to the homeworld for court-martial after his failures, stood before the War Council with grim satisfaction. Because while we were conquering colonies, they were preparing for this. Every retreat bought them time. Time to build ships. Time to train crews. Time to study us and learn exactly how to defeat us. You dare suggest this is my fault? Zaltharan roared. I suggest that we underestimated them from the beginning, Xyloth replied. We saw their retreats as weakness. We didn't see them as strategy. The doors to the chamber burst open. A communications officer stumbled in, his mandibles clicking in panic. Grand Dominarch. The humans have destroyed the fleets at Tauran 4, Mexith 7, and Kolden Prime. They're systematically dismantling our military infrastructure. Send reinforcements. There are no reinforcements, Grand Dominarch. Every system is under attack simultaneously. They're hitting us everywhere we're weak. Xyloth watched Zaltharan's rage turn to fear and felt no satisfaction. The Krovanax Empire was dying, killed by its own arrogance and a species that had turned retreat into the deadliest weapon in the galaxy. Admiral Lysander Kane commanded the assault on the Krovanax shipyards at Vrak Station, the heart of their military production. The station was massive, capable of producing 50 warships simultaneously. It was also defended by the 2nd Imperial Fleet, 300 ships strong. They're forming defensive positions around the shipyards, Commander Okoye reported. They're going to make us fight through them. Good, Lysander replied. We've been waiting for a straight fight. The Battle of Vrak Station lasted 14 hours. The Krovanax fought with desperate courage, knowing that losing the shipyards meant losing any chance of rebuilding their fleet. But they were fighting against ships designed by engineers who had studied every second of footage from the previous battles, crewed by men and women who had trained relentlessly for 6 months, and commanded by officers who had learned the Krovanax playbook inside and out. The 2nd Imperial Fleet was destroyed to the last ship. Vrak Station fell, and with it, the Krovanax Empire's ability to wage offensive war. General Nathan Cross led the Marine assault on Kolden Prime, one of the Krovanax Empire's core worlds. His 20,000 Marines, veterans of 5 defensive battles, were now on the offensive. And they were magnificent. Lieutenant Kira Sato, promoted to captain after New Terra, led the assault on the Planetary Command Center. The Krovanax defenders were hardened warriors, but they had never faced humans attacking with the same ferocity they had shown defending. Remember Meridian's hope. Kira shouted as her company breached the outer defenses. Remember Haven's Rest. Remember every colony that burned. Make them pay. The Marines poured through the breach like an avenging tide. The Krovanax had learned to fear humans defending. Now they learned to fear humans attacking. The command center fell in 6 hours. Commander Xyloth would have been proud of the defense his warriors mounted. But pride didn't stop railgun rounds or turn aside plasma fire. The defenders died at their posts, brave and doomed. When Kira secured the facility, she found the command logs. They detailed every battle, every atrocity, every war crime the Krovanax had committed. The bombardment of civilian centers. The deliberate targeting of evacuation transports. The execution of prisoners. Copy everything, she ordered. The galaxy needs to see what we stopped. Operation Reckoning lasted 60 days. 60 days of systematic dismantling of the Krovanax Empire. By the end, 40 of the 47 Krovanax systems had fallen. Their fleet was destroyed. Their shipyards were rubble. Their military command structure was shattered. And humanity had done it while taking prisoners, protecting civilians and following the rules of war. They had shown the galaxy that it was possible to wage total war without becoming monsters. On the 61st day, Grand Dominarch Zaltharan stood in the ruins of his throne room, watching human marines secure his palace. Admiral Lysander Kane walked through the debris, old and tired but victorious. "You defeated us," Zaltharan said, his voice empty of the arrogance that had once defined him. "You retreated 5 times. We thought you were weak." "We are weak when we fight alone," Lysander replied. "But we're strongest when we fight for something bigger than ourselves. You came to Meridian's Hope expecting easy prey. You found people willing to die so others could live. That's not weakness. That's the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." "What happens now?" Zaltharan asked. "Now you face trial for war crimes. Your empire is dissolved. Your conquered peoples are freed. And you'll spend the rest of your life remembering that humanity gave you every chance to stop, and you didn't take it." Lysander turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. 8,000 Marines died on Meridian's Hope, buying time for civilians to evacuate. 4,000 more died on New Terra. Thousands more across the other colonies. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? It's not our weapons or our ships or our tactics. It's that we believe some things are worth dying for. And we'll make you believe it too." As Lysander left the throne room, he thought of Marcus Thorne and the defenders of Meridian's Hope. They had held the line when it seemed hopeless. They had bought the time needed for the evacuation. They had shown the galaxy what humanity could do when pushed to the edge. The retreats hadn't been defeats. They had been the bow being drawn. And the arrow had found its mark. The aftermath. 6 months after the fall of the Crovanax Empire, Admiral Lysander Kane stood at the memorial on Meridian's Hope. The colony had been rebuilt, its cities rising from the ashes. But the starport where Marcus Thorne had made his last stand remained untouched, preserved as a monument. 8,000 names were carved into black stone. 8,000 colonial marines who had held the line. Lysander found Marcus's name and placed his hand against the cold stone. "We did it, Captain," he said quietly. "We made them understand." The memorial wasn't just on Meridian's Hope. Every colony that had fallen, every battlefield where humans had died, now bore monuments to those who had bought time with their lives. Haven's Rest. New Terra. The smaller outposts. Thousands of names. Thousands of heroes. Fleet Admiral Helena Darkwood stood beside him, older now but still unbowed. "The Galactic Concordance has ratified the Treaty of Terra. The Crovanax Empire is officially dissolved. Their conquered worlds are independent. War crimes tribunals are underway." "And our losses?" Lysander asked. 17,000 Marines killed in the defensive battles. 34,000 fleet personnel lost in Operation Reckoning. 850,000 civilians who didn't make it off the colonies in time. The numbers were staggering. But Lysander thought about the alternative. 3 million civilians on Meridian's Hope alone, 12 million on New Terra. Hundreds of millions across human space who would have died if the Crovanax had continued unchecked. "They'll remember the retreats," he said. "Good," Helena replied. "Let them remember. Let every species in the galaxy know that when humans retreat, it's not because we're beaten. It's because we're choosing our moment." The trial of Grand Dominarch Zaltharan was broadcast across the galaxy. The evidence presented, the bombardment of civilian centers, the targeting of evacuation ships, the execution of prisoners, shocked even species that had considered the Crovanax unstoppable. Commander Xyloth testified for the prosecution. He described the battles, the human defensive tactics, the growing realization that the Crovanax were fighting an enemy that learned faster than they could adapt. "We saw their retreats as weakness," he told the tribunal. "We didn't see the strategic calculation. Every retreat saved civilians. Every retreat bought time. Every retreat taught them how to defeat us. When they finally attacked, they had studied every detail of our military, identified every weakness, and prepared counters for every tactic. We walked into a trap that took 6 months to spring, and we never saw it until too late." The tribunal found Zaltharan guilty on 47 counts of war crimes. He was sentenced to life imprisonment on a penal colony, where he would spend his remaining years understanding exactly what his arrogance had cost his species. Captain Ilara Voss stood on the bridge of the Retribution, now flagship of the Third Fleet, assigned to patrol the former Crovanax territories. Her mission was to ensure the peace, to protect the newly independent worlds, and to show the galaxy that humanity could be as good at building peace as it had been at waging war. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal from Tauran 4. Pirate raid on the outer settlements." "Set course," Ilara ordered. "Maximum burn. And broadcast to the pirates. This system is under Terran protection. Surrender or face the consequences." The pirates, seeing the human fleet bearing down on them, wisely chose surrender. They had heard the stories of what happened to those who fought humans who were defending something. On Earth, the survivors of the Meridian's Hope garrison were honored in a ceremony attended by millions. Lieutenant Kara Novak, one of the few who had survived, stood before the crowd and spoke for her fallen comrades. "They called us heroes," she said, her voice carrying across the plaza. "But we were just people doing what needed to be done." Captain Marcus Thorne didn't hold the starport because he wanted glory. He held it so that 657,000 people could live. Every Marine who died on Meridian's Hope, on Haven's Rest, on New Terra, they all understood something simple. Some things are worth fighting for. Some things are worth dying for. And if you have to retreat to protect those things, you retreat. But you come back. You always come back. The crowd erupted in applause, but Kara wasn't finished. The galaxy learned something about humanity during this war. They learned that we don't just fight for territory or resources. We fight for each other. And when you threaten our people, you don't just face our military. You face every human who understands that we're strongest when we stand together. The Krovenaks thought our retreats meant we were weak. They learned the hard way that a human retreat is just a human reloading. General Nathan Cross was promoted to Supreme Commander of Colonial Defense Forces. His first act was to establish the Marcus Thorne Academy, a training facility for colonial Marines where the lessons learned from the Krovenaks War would be taught to every generation. "We got lucky," he told the first class of cadets. "The Krovenaks gave us time to prepare. The next enemy might not be so obliging. So you're going to learn how to fight defensively, how to conduct tactical withdrawals, how to save civilian lives while buying time for counterattacks. You're going to learn that retreat is not defeat. It's strategy. And you're going to learn that the most important thing a Marine can do is make sure the people we're protecting survive, even if we don't." The cadets listened with the intensity of those who understood they were learning from history written in blood. Lieutenant Kira Sato, now promoted to major and assigned to the academy as an instructor, taught advanced small unit tactics. Her classes were always oversubscribed, because everyone wanted to learn from a veteran of Meridian's Hope. "The Krovenaks were bigger, stronger, and better equipped than us," she told her students. "But they had one critical weakness: they thought those things mattered. Size doesn't matter when you're fighting in close quarters. Strength doesn't matter when you're targeting armor joints. Better equipment doesn't matter when you know exactly how to defeat it. What matters is training, discipline, and the understanding that you're fighting for something bigger than yourself." She paused, looking at the young faces before her. "Some of you will die defending colonies. It's a statistical certainty. But if you've trained well, if you've learned from our mistakes and our victories, then you'll die buying time for civilians to evacuate. You'll die protecting something worth protecting. And that, cadets, is what makes you a colonial Marine." The Krovenaks War changed the galaxy's perception of humanity. Before, humans had been seen as newcomers, species barely off their homeworld. After, they were seen as something else entirely, a species that could absorb terrible losses, learn from defeats, and come back stronger than before. Ambassador Chin Li, humanity's representative to the Galactic Concordance, noticed the change immediately. Species that had dismissed humanity before now sought alliances. Former enemies suddenly wanted trade agreements. Everyone wanted to be on humanity's good side. "They fear us," Chin told the Federation Council. "But more importantly, they respect us. The Krovenaks War proved that humanity doesn't just fight wars. We end them." "Should we be concerned about that perception?" Counselor Zhang asked. "No," Chin replied. "Because we've also shown them that we fight with honor. We took Krovenaks prisoners when we could have executed them. We protected Krovenak civilians when we could have left them to die. We followed the rules of war even when our enemy didn't. That's the reputation we want, strong enough that no one wants to fight us, but honorable enough that everyone wants to ally with us." On the anniversary of the Battle of Meridian's Hope, Admiral Lysander Kane retired from active service. His final speech to the fleet was short and to the point. "We learned something important during the Krovenaks War. We learned that humans are at their most dangerous when they're protecting something they love. We learned that retreat is not defeat, it's preparation. And we learned that the galaxy's other species need to understand one simple truth. If you make humanity retreat, you better hope we don't come back. Because when we do, we bring everything we have." He paused, looking at the assembled officers. "But we also learned something else. We learned that war should be the last resort, not the first. We learned that strength should be used to protect, not to conquer. We learned that the true measure of a civilization isn't how well it fights, but what it's willing to fight for. Remember that, and humanity will endure for 10,000 years. Captain Marcus Thorne's sister, Dr. Elena Thorne, established a foundation in her brother's name. The Thorne Foundation provided support for the families of fallen Marines, scholarships for their children, and counseling for survivors dealing with the trauma of war. "My brother died buying time for strangers to escape," she said at the foundation's opening. "He never met most of the people he saved. But he died for them anyway because that's what humans do. We protect each other. We sacrifice for each other. And when the time comes, we avenge each other." This foundation exists to honor that sacrifice and to make sure no family bears the burden of that sacrifice alone. Commander Xyloth, after testifying at the war crimes trials, requested asylum in the Terran Federation. It was granted, and he spent his remaining years working as an advisor to colonial defense forces, teaching them about Krovenak's tactics and strategy. "I want to prevent another war," he told Admiral Darkwood when she questioned his motives. "My species learned the hard way what happens when you underestimate humanity. I want to make sure other species learn it without the bloodshed." "Why help us?" Darkwood asked. "We destroyed your empire." "Because you were right and we were wrong," Xyloth replied simply. "Because you fought with honor even when we didn't. Because you could have exterminated my species and chose not to. I saw what happened at the starport on Meridian's Hope. I saw what humans are capable of when defending something they love. I'd rather spend my life making sure the galaxy understands that so no one else makes the mistake we made." The final monument to the Krovenak's War was built on Earth, in the center of Geneva where the Terran Federation had been founded. It was a simple structure, a wall of names, every human who had died in the war, civilian and military alike. At the top, carved in letters 2 meters high, was a single phrase: "They held the line." And beneath it, smaller but no less important: "So others could live." On the 10th anniversary of the Battle of Meridian's Hope, the survivors gathered at the starport for the ceremony. Kara Novak stood at the podium, older now, gray showing at her temples. She looked out at the crowd: veterans, families, civilians who had been evacuated, children who had been born after the war. "We're here to remember," she said. "To remember the 8,000 who died here buying time. To remember Marcus Thorne, who gave the order to hold and kept it until the last transport was away. To remember every Marine who understood that retreat wasn't an option because 3 million people were counting on them." She paused, looking at the memorial. "But we're also here to remember what they taught us. They taught us that humanity is strongest when we protect each other. They taught us that retreat is not defeat if you come back stronger. They taught us that the galaxy needs to understand one simple truth about humans: we don't start fights. But when you force us to fight, we don't stop until it's finished." A young girl in the crowd, maybe 8 years old, raised her hand. "Miss Novak? Were you scared?" Kara smiled. "Terrified. Every day. But being scared doesn't mean you run. It means you understand what's at stake. And what was at stake was worth being scared for." "Will there be another war?" the girl asked. "Maybe," Kara admitted. "The galaxy's a big place and not everyone has learned the lessons the Krovenaks learned. But if there is another war, we'll be ready. We'll remember Meridian's Hope. We'll remember that humans don't just retreat, we reload. And we'll make sure that anyone who threatens human space understands that making us retreat is the worst mistake they can make." As the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Kara stood alone at the memorial. She traced Marcus's name with her fingers, remembering the captain who had given the order to hold, who had died keeping it. "We held the line, sir," she whispered. "And then we made them pay for every life they took. Just like you knew we would." The sun set over Meridian's Hope, casting long shadows across the memorial. The starport stood silent, a monument to courage and sacrifice. And across human space, in 50 systems and 1,000 colonies, people went about their lives knowing that if danger came, others would stand in the gap. Because that's what humans did. They held the line. They retreated when necessary. And they always came back.